Well, greetings and welcome to the dividing line. It's 65 degrees in Phoenix, and therefore it's time to get the koojies out. And I went with the muted colors to start off with because I don't want to cause Rich any undue stress. He has Coogi derangement syndrome, and so I don't want to make it really rough for him. I could have come in with just one of my super wild, colorful ones, and it might have caused him some issues. So we're going with the mild stuff today. And I was just looking at the weather. Thanksgiving Day, 72 degrees in Phoenix, 72 and sunny. So palm trees swaying, the breeze is blowing.
You are leaving at the wrong time of year.
We'll see what the weather's like back east. It's definitely going to be cooler than here, I would assume. But anyway, I leave this time of year every year. Well, this is last year. And I'll before I mention that, I'm going to be transparently honest here. Rich doesn't know about this either, but this time of year, sometimes I eat things I shouldn't eat. Christmas stuff, things like that contain stuff that isn't good for me. So my heart's doing the flippy floppy thingy, and right now I'm fine, but it might go flippy floppy on me, and we may need a commercial break or just kill the cameras real quick so that nobody makes a lot of money off of memeing the YouTube of my eyes crossing and stuff like that. It has been an interesting day so far. So just being open and honest about that. It happens when you had cardiac ablation years ago and it didn't work. Well, it did for 6 months. It worked great for 6 months. But I'm a super healer. I heal stuff. Did that with LASIK, and I did that with this too, and only made it worse. It's great. Yeah, these old bodies, they don't last as well as you'd like them to. So anyways, we are taking your Zoom calls. We have 3 Zoom callers at the moment. And we've got a title now. I have no stinking idea how you do this. Okay? I can't direct you to a URL. Obviously, at least 3 people in the world do know how to do it because they're already in the waiting room, ready to join us. I assume if you go to the Alpha and Omega X page, maybe there might be something there that tells you how to do this. Maybe.
Well, yes, it's on our X page. It's also on our website, and it's on our Facebook page, and it's in the app. All those instructions are there, sent out this morning, sent out yesterday, and we called an audible on that one. So it's all out there.
Yeah, we called an audible. I should say, I'll give a quick report because I put it on X. We're not out of the woods yet. For those of you who didn't see that, we have 5 little kittens that were born in our backyard that I've put a lot of effort into getting their lives started correctly and safely, and love the little boogers. And in fact, my wife and I have fallen in love with 2 of the 5. We're going to be keeping those 2. We found a home for the other 3. But yesterday, well, this has started a few days ago, but yesterday it became very clear that 3 of the 5 are very sick. And so I was making multiple trips to the vet yesterday, bleeding money. That is so, wow. They were nice. They gave me drugs for all 3 with only seeing 1, because I have the same thing anyways. And so my wife and I are now doing the how do you wrap up a 5.5-month-old kitten and force that thing into their mouth and squirt stuff down their throats and make them do that kind of stuff and get that medicine into them. And I did get a kitty wrapper thingy from Amazon that came this around noon today, I guess, that sort of sticks to them a little bit better and holds them a little bit tighter. They've been great. the two we want to keep, well, we'd like to keep all of them, but we can't. The two sweetest ones are the sickest ones. And they're not out of the woods. They're not out of the woods. So we'll see. We'll see. So we just keep giving them the meds and hope and pray for the best. So that's what I was doing yesterday. And it turned out they ended up calling me and asking about blood tests and stuff like that right when we would have been doing the show. So it worked out best that way. So for those who were wondering, no, we're not out of the woods yet. Remind me later to give you an update. They were walking around some today. They were sort of out in the sun and looking a little bit better, but I don't know. They're teeny tiny little things. They really are. And so the three really sick ones are Tank, Tiger, and Sadie. And so Kelly and I want to keep Tank and Sadie. We'd love to keep Tank, Sadie, and Tiger too, but we've already got way too many to begin with. And one of our oldest one, who is a tortoiseshell, a tortie, she just hates all of them. Those poor little kittens walk by, she just goes, "Fuck!" Stay away from me. That's just how she is. Okay, all right. So I'm just going to sort of go with the order they've got here. I'm assuming that's the order they came in, right? What do you mean? What do you mean putting your hands up? You're supposed to know this stuff.
Hey, there's a lot to keep up with. I don't know what order Zoom puts them in. It just they're there, and probably, maybe, who knows?
Well, this is weird because we have two that are similar topics. Do you see that? So I'm pretty sure Adrian was the first one in, I think. Okay? So let's start with Adrian, especially because I think I can see Adrian as far as a image goes. Not actually see via Zoom, but I think that's probably... Is that your actual picture, Adrian?
Yes.
Oh, well, it's maybe the first time I've ever talked with somebody on the dividing line that I actually know what they look like. That's sort of weird. So anyways, yes, Adrian, Reformed Baptist in a Lutheran church. What's up?
Yes. I'm calling from Trondheim, Norway. First, I just want to say I'm really appreciative of your ministry. I've been Christian for 10 years now, and I think I started listening to you during my first year as a Christian. So it's been really helpful.
Well, good. That's great to hear. I got a chance to go to Norway only once while I was still traveling, and it was a beautiful place, beautiful people, and the place we stayed at, there were sheep on the roof. So I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean, but that's how it was.
Yeah, that's the thing. Where did you go? Because I think I heard you in the G3 conference. I said that you were in.
It's been too many years. I don't recall the name of the place. Sorry.
All right. Yeah. So as a Reformed Baptist, there aren't really any Reformed Baptist churches in Norway. There are a few down south, but in the city I'm in, there is basically none. So me and my family have ended up attending a Lutheran free church. So far, it's been going quite well. They have been very respectful of my stance on baptism. I have an open dialogue with the pastor, and we've gotten quite close. But the situation is not just that we're just attending. He has asked me to preach 3 times, and I've done that so far, and he's asking me to preach more during the next semester. And I'm also leading a Bible group for the young men in the church. He also started flirting with the idea that I would come alongside him in ministry as an elder in the future, maybe. But there's this issue of baptism. Of course, they hold to the Augsburg Confession, and they also have a Presbyterian that's above their church. So they have to kind of stick within the lines of what they're allowed to do. And so it's a strange situation where I've been a Reformed Baptist, not officially a member of the church, but I've been allowed to preach there, and we take part in the church. It's become our family.
Yeah. But it seems to me from what you described, it seems to me, Adrian, what you're describing to me is that you're in a in a place where, well, let's put it this way. When I was there, the believers that I was speaking at, the conference I was speaking at, it was pretty clear that the state church was very non-evangelical, really apostate and unbelieving, basically. So it sounds like you're dealing with a free Lutheran church, probably not overly big.
No, quite small. This one's separated from the larger free church in the city. So this is the conservatives of the free church in my city.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're talking about a small group of believers in a small town, and they recognize that you're serious and you're committed, and hence, sometimes that makes strange bedfellows, but that's the situation the Lord puts you in, and in that situation, you always try to be transparent. You always try to be honest, have open lines of communication. It could blow up rather easily if someone decided to try to take advantage of the situation and push their own perspectives and things like that.
Yeah.
But as long as you all are on the same page, you're focused on issues of the gospel, you're living in a very, very, very secular society. I've seen folks survive that. Up until the point where someone, puts the foot down and says, no, we've all got to, do the same thing, say the same things. Obviously, if you had lots of options there and lots of believing Christians, then, you can push for a little more consistency. But it sounds to me like you all are sort of a desert oasis in the middle of nothing. And so, from my perspective, it would be a whole lot better to stay focused on the main things. And look, I've encountered a lot of different views on baptism from Lutherans, and I've encountered Lutheran monergists who don't go some of the more formal routes, and so I can certainly see that working. You need to have fellowship. There needs to be service to other Christians, being served by other Christians. It's an important thing to do. And so, up until the point where you feel like you're being pressured to compromise something that's really important, become a Fritz Erba, if you know who Fritz Erba was.
Yes, I've heard your stories.
yeah. It doesn't sound like they're going to be chucking you into the into the prison house there. So, hey, I would say be thankful for the fellowship, be thankful for the ministry of the word, contribute as you can. I think there probably needs to be a regular commitment on everybody's part to provide that space that would allow you to continue to do that. It's really easy to become complacent of, we've been doing this a long time, we don't have to worry about that much anymore, and then all of a sudden it pops up and smacks everybody in the face. So it needs to be something that's kept in everybody's minds, that we're cooperating together despite our differences. But yeah, be a lighthouse in that place, and in the darkness of the secular Scandinavian countries, be a light for the gospel. Scandinavia is a great example of what happens when you end up with a state church that no longer seeks the actual conversion of the people that are in it. And the result is, as you know, it's very hard to do evangelism in a place that has a state church, because everybody feels like they're already right with God to begin with. And even though they're walking far, far away from his ways.
Yeah. One of the elders, they told me they would rather have fellowship with a Reformed Baptist that's conservative and believing than a liberal Lutheran.
Oh yeah. We have a lot more. We have a lot more in common. I mean, I've said over and over again that the OPC and Reformed Baptists are the closest two denominations that I know of. And I'm not sure if they're monergists or not. That's sort of an important issue, but you certainly can be if you read Bondage of the Will. You're gonna come out on the right side of things there. But I could certainly see that happening, and I could certainly see you all investing yourselves in that fellowship and proclaiming Christ in that place together, despite what differences you might have.
Yeah. About the topic of monergism, one thing I haven't been able to wrap my head around is the Lutheran view of predestination, the single predestination.
Yeah.
To me, it sounds like the natural, the logical consequence is double, even if you say it's only single.
Yeah, and real quickly, because we got other callers we need to get to.
Yeah,
but
sorry.
My viewpoint there, and of course Lutherans disagree with me, and they have the perfect right to do that. But I see two Luthers historically. I see the up to 1525 Luther and the post 1525 Luther, and it seems to me that if the pre 1525 Luther had continued on the course he was on, that you'd have a much clearer Lutheran definition of predestination and election. And he didn't stay on that. And then I think Melanchthon took the movement another direction after his death. So, you can make some pretty strong arguments from the pre-1525 material, but there's only so much. I mean, you've got the Bondage of the Will, some sermons, stuff like that, but it's limited. And, you can make the argument, well, consistent. If he had been consistent, then this is what it would have led to. But, that's how it goes. And as long as they know what your confession of faith says and where you're coming from, I would hope the Lord would bless your joint ministry there in Norway. And we need faithful men in difficult times, and so I pray that you and your family be blessed.
All right. Thank you, Dr. White.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. Nice to see you. Nice to talk with you. All right. Because we just talked to Adrian on a Reformed Baptist in a Lutheran church. This may not have been the order, but we'll try to get to everybody. I'll try to talk a little faster, I guess. Let's talk to Joel, the Reformed Baptist in the PCA. so I figured these are related. Let's get these questions dealt with right off the top here. So, Joel, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Dr. White. How about yourself?
Well, like I said, I could pass out at any moment. So, but the heart is beating fairly regularly at the moment. So we'll hope that will last through the rest of the program.
Well, praise the Lord. Well, I'm Dr. White. I'm from Houston, Texas. I'm a member of a conservative church within the PCA. I'm a Reformed Baptist, and at our current church, my wife and I love the preaching and the teaching, the community, the fellowship. It's a place that we feel shepherded, and like the leadership of our church is faithful to the principle of sola scriptura. However, as I'm pushing forward in marriage, I understand that I'm not necessarily at the place to be somebody who's necessarily elder qualified. I'm about 3 years into marriage and still working on caring for my wife in a Christ-like manner. However, I understand that the Lord has gifted me with the ability to understand His Word. I have a desire and a particular gifting when it comes to theology and biblical exposition. I know right now the church that I'm at currently is where we need to be. However, I also understand that at certain points in people's lives, when they be qualified men, they are commanded to seek either a diaconal position or an elder position. being in the PCA, I'm never going to be able to be ordained because I don't fully affirm the Westminster Confession of Faith. However, I would feel comfortable affirming a document like the London Baptist Confession of Faith.
Right.
How should I endeavor forward being a faithful member of my church, but also if God were to call me into ministry or some other office in the church, what's the best way to go about that?
Well, now this is interesting in comparison to Adrian's situation. I would imagine in Houston that you have wider options. Of course, having to drive through Houston fairly regularly myself, I'm not sure you want to drive very far in Houston traffic. I think the 10 going through Houston is probably backed up and locked up at 3:00 in the morning. It's just, and your roads around there. Should we pray for healing for the roads in Houston, or just what? I'm really not sure. It's bad. Anyway, so Adrian's in a situation where this is pretty much probably going to be the only faithful church that he can find, and I would assume in Houston that there would be a number of faithful churches that you could serve in. You're currently in a PCA church. I happen to know, as you probably know, when I'm in Houston, the primary church that I'm ministering at, doing debates, is First Lutheran downtown. And the pastor there is a great guy, and we get along on, there's just a lot of topics that he would be willing to have me represent his side in debate there. So there's another example. I and then the church that I'm one of the pastors at, Apologia Church, we try to be as biblically, faithfully ecumenical as we can be. So, you're being that with a PCA church. But, they have, I would imagine if they're conservative, that means they're believing Presbyterians. That means they have specific standards. And so you're limited as to how you can exercise your gifts in a context like that. So, and that's the way it should be. We have Presbyterians in the membership of our church. But the position of the church is very clear: eldership, the diaconate, things like that. That's pretty clear as to where we're standing and the confession that we make and things like that. So, yeah, as you're young in your marriage. You're only 40 years behind me in marriage. And you have the right emphasis on, growing in that relationship with your wife. When children come along, that's obviously going to raise issues. When you're a Baptist, even a Reformed Baptist, in a PCA context. And there can be some serious pressures there that, again, if you were out in the middle of nowhere and you didn't have any other choices, then you have to deal with those pressures and maybe make accommodations that don't require you to compromise your faith, but that you can get along with. But in Houston, there are, I'm sure, a number of faithful evangelical Reformed Baptist churches that you could be a part of. So it's a little bit of a different context, I would assume, than Adrian has, where you're forced to make those sort of ecumenical connections. Whereas at the moment, you're enjoying that fellowship, and that's great. But hey, if you want to move into further levels of ministry and teaching, you have to be in a place where you can do that. And given you're in Houston, there would be places where you could do that. Still there? I think we yeah, well, it's muted according to the screen. But Well, hopefully that was useful. Sometimes things happen when you're on Zoom. You just have to. Hopefully that was useful. Okay, pretty sure that Caesar was next up. So let's talk to Caesar.
Hi, Dr. White.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. My second time being on the divided line. Hopefully you can just hear me and not the music in the background.
Rich, if there's any way to turn things up in here, I'm really struggling.
Is it okay now? So is your volume okay?
It's nothing that it's not a problem for you. It's just how we do not have the highest tech mechanism for me to be able to hear callers. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. Maybe if I just, because I'm on my phone, so I'll just.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Closer. Okay. So my question has to do with in reading the Church Fathers, usually when I'm talking with Eastern Orthodox individuals or even Roman Catholics, we tend to talk about the Church Fathers a lot, and I wonder that since sometimes the Church Fathers, given their time and place, they sometimes would, I think, use some Greek philosophy in order to defend their faith. So I was just wondering, uh, how much should we, I guess, value some of the decisions given their use of Greek philosophy at that times? Is there a line or a specific, I guess, how do I say this? A specific, oh yeah, let's just say a specific line in which you would say, probably not, don't go that way, just because the, sorry.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward for me. The farther you get down in church history, the deeper you get into the encrustation of tradition. And you see it developing. This is one of the key things that people have to keep in mind. And it's one of the key reasons why a lot of, how shall we put it? There are a lot of folks who don't follow me down this path that leads them eventually to significantly different theological conclusions. I see the reality of the early church being it starts, when people talk about, well, it was apostolic, and so you had the apostles, and so it was really pure back then. Reality is that, yeah, there are some startlingly good examples of sound apostolic, that is representational of what we have from the apostles themselves in Scripture. And the worldview they represented, which was not the Greek philosophical worldview. Now, their message had to go out into that world and had to answer questions. And just as the gospel had to go east and encounter Eastern worldviews, it went west and had to encounter Greek philosophy, Roman philosophy, which was normally just Greek philosophy with different names. And so that was a necessary thing to have happen. But what happens is when you look at someone like Clement of Alexandria, Origen, it is so painfully obvious that the worldview that informs the New Testament writings and the Old Testament writings, well, the biblical writings as a whole, becomes eclipsed often with Greek philosophical categories. And words that have one meaning within the New Testament end up with another meaning in light of Greek philosophy. And what happens is you start getting erroneous traditions that give rise to more erroneous traditions, and then more, and then hook up with some more over here, and you you start seeing the process that eventually leads you to the things we see in the medieval period or the things we see today. I mean, when you think about it, that recent Roman Catholic document just 2 weeks ago is just truly astonishing that today a group that calls itself the Christian Church is literally having internal arguments about whether you should identify and use this terminology of Mary, co-redemptrix and co-mediatrix with Christ. There is nothing more painfully obvious than that's not something that the Apostolic Church ever even dreamed of teaching or taught to anybody, but it's the result of centuries of accretion over time. And so there is a fine line between wanting to bring the gospel to the Greeks and having the Greeks take over the gospel. And you've heard the phrase before, I'm sure. What does Jerusalem have to do with Athens? And so in that 2nd century, this was a major issue, as well it should have been. What does Jerusalem have to do with Athens? And when you use Athenian terminology, are you running the risk of losing the message that was delivered in Jerusalem? And eventually, on many things, you do. One of the things I have to do over the next 11 months before a fairly major engagement in 2026, Lord willing, I'm having to read a particular corpus of works that I believe had extremely negative impact on the Christian church by a self-professed Christian, but very negative impact. And it's just Greek philosophy. It's the amount of apostolic teaching, biblical categories in this corpus of writings is absolutely minimal. And the exegesis is horrific. So I don't like having to do that. I have to, in light of the particular topic that I am addressing, and I think it's important. But that's a good example how 500 years after the birth of Christ, you have men calling themselves Christians who are 98% Greek philosophers using 2% biblical language. Now, that doesn't mean everybody did that. There are examples in the 6th century of bishops who still have a deep biblical rooting for their theology, even when they're believing things that I would say had already departed a fair bit from the biblical narrative. And so you learn to, when you read later writers, you learn to appreciate when you encounter the biblical truth shining through, but you also got to get used to the fact that very often you're reading for pages and what you're reading isn't really biblically faithful. It may be pious. It may have originated in a good desire, but the apostles wouldn't have even recognized it. And then all of a sudden you turn the page, wow, here's a whole page of great stuff. And then, okay, it sort of gets mixed for a while and then back to a lot of the Greek philosophy. So it is, that's why the reading the early church fathers apologetically, that is, applying them and talking to Roman Catholics or Eastern Orthodox, it is never my intention to try to communicate the idea that these writings carry an authority equal to anywhere near that of the apostolic writings themselves. I am a biblicist. I'm a Reformed biblicist. And so I can recognize good things in patristic sources and then also recognize that there were some really horrific things therein. And if Roman Catholics were honest with history, which their dogma really doesn't allow them to be, they would have to admit that they're in the same boat. When they read the early church fathers, if they're being honest, they'll encounter stuff that is very clearly negative toward the claims that Rome has made. For example, regarding Petrine primacy and stuff like that. Rome says that's the early faith of the church. It's always been the faith of the church. It's just simply not true. So they have to, like Jerry Matitix did in one of my earliest debates. Basically, I quoted Tertullian. Well, he wasn't a church father. Well, yes, of course he was. Okay, he became a Montanus. That's why he's not Saint Tertullian from the Roman Catholic perspective, but he's a church father. And they start picking and choosing. They read with Augustine, they read all his stuff about church order and go, there it is. But then they read his stuff on grace and predestination, like, that hasn't been defined by the church, blah, 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 blah. So they do the same thing. We just do it openly, and our standard is the unchanging standard of Scripture. That's the difference. Hello? Oh, Rich had you off. Sorry, I couldn't hear you. It's all Rich's fault. Everything's Rich's fault. Try that again.
Would it then be fair to say, for example, that when the church fathers when they refer to Jesus as the Logos, and they go through this whole chain of Logos being reason, that it's a good insight and pious, but would the proper way to view that is that John wouldn't have had that in view and be more of a Hebrew understanding of the word being Logos?
Well, yeah, I do think that second and third century Logos Christology imported categories into the meaning of that term that would not come from Memra, Devar, the Hebrew background. And I do think that when you read John 1 and you look at the Logos Christology that is presented there, that the proper background for that John himself utilizes would give you exactly that it's the Word of God, spoken, creation, so on and so forth. And when people like Justin Martyr in the 2nd century, and then people following them, insert into that term Logos primarily Greek philosophical categories. And of course, you need to realize a lot of modern New Testament scholars would say, well, John's very, very late. Some would even say into the 2nd century. And he's specifically trying to follow Philo or things like that and trying to make that kind of presentation. So the lower a bibliology you have, and I would say believing the New Testament self-contradictory, it's not written by the people that claim to be written by, so on and so forth, is a lower bibliology. The lower your bibliology, the more likely you're going to be to buy into that kind of stuff and allow for that kind of stuff. If you have a high bibliology, then you're going to go, no, these things need to be defined first and foremost in a biblical context. So, yeah, I would say that the appropriate starting place for Logos comes from its use in the Old Testament and the Hebrew terms that it translated.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. White. Thank you for your ministry. And lastly, what's your favorite book on the ecumenical councils to study?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I've read the majority of books that are going to be focused on the ecumenical councils as ecumenical councils are going to be written by Roman Catholics or Eastern Orthodox, mainly Roman Catholics. And there are some excellent Roman Catholic historians who are honest in their evaluation. I mean, you always have to keep in mind, they have a faith commitment, maybe somewhere. You sort of have to see how much it influences things. I don't have them sitting in front of me right now to give you the names. One of them's orange. Remember that much. I would never tell anybody to shy away from those sources. They can be very, very well done. You just have to, be discerning. I've got the big old, there went my keys. I got the big old beast here by Richard Price, the Acts of the Second Council of Nicaea, with all my little marks in it since we finally found it again. I have that in PDF format too, and that's what I'm using to do some preparation for next year as well. So, you get the best information you can. You keep an eye on where it's coming from, and you go from there. Okay? All right. Thank you very much. I believe our next one on the screen that I can see anyways is Brenda. Hello, Brenda. How are you? Still muted. There you go.
Hi, Dr. White.
Hello.
How are you? I mean, I know how you are. You've already talked about it. I want to say real quick that I will be praying for you with your heart issues. I know you've had them for a while, and so I'll be praying for you about that.
I appreciate that.
Okay. My issue that I wanted to bring up kind of relates a little bit to what you were talking to Cesar about parsing who those people are that you need to completely avoid, because even though they say some good things, that the bad things that they're saying theologically are really awful. So you need to avoid them completely. And those others that, well, there may be some things you disagree with, but you can go ahead and read them and there would be good things to come out. Let me give you examples. What brought this up for me was I happened upon your mashup with Zach and Luke about the Corey Mahler debate. And one of the things that you all were talking about was that he draws people in because he says some good things, but that other stuff about Black people not being able to be sanctified is just evil. That's just evil. And so he should be completely avoided. But another instance for me was I had heard some things about Tim Keller years ago and about that he kind of social justice-y and his ecclesiology was a little wonky. And so when I heard those things, I thought, well, I'm not going to talk with him. Well, my church, I go to a Reformed Baptist church, and the two teaching pastors are excellent expositors. Well, one of them has read Tim Keller, obviously, and uses quotes from him that are spot on. So I'm thinking, well, and so you've talked about that, like you were talking about the church fathers, that you need to kind of weed out, you read them, but you realize that there are times when they're spot on, and then there are times when they haven't hit the mark. Yeah. So just talk a little bit about how to discern between who you mark and avoid and who you do that other.
Yeah, Brenda, this is a sort of tough subject simply because, well, I'll use the example that popped up a couple days ago in the controversy online with Skillet. Okay, so I talked about this on the last program. I spent 15 minutes talking about it, and it's like, look, I know these people. I know their hearts. They've proven themselves to me over the years. I mean, it's not like I'm John's longtime friend, but we've been friends almost 5.5 years, and I've had a lot of communication during that time. Anyway, the attacks that came against them for doing I thought, tremendous music video that had not only great production value, but great message in it, primarily came from people who have an incredibly narrow range of what they would allow to be considered Christians. So in other words, as I did as a young person, I was raised independent fundamentalist Baptist, and I was raised to believe that we didn't even know what an Orthodox was. That wasn't part of it. But I was raised to believe that Catholics, Lutherans, Presbyterians, and pretty much anybody that didn't have our eschatology right down to the final letter just weren't Christians. The reason they didn't believe what we believe is because they just weren't Christians. And that was just sort of a given in that group. I had a guy 2 days ago in X. He had agreed with something I had said, agreed with what I had said was true, but then he made some statement that made me go, I'm not sure what you mean by this. And when he responded, it was clear that what he was saying was, if you don't have the dispensational understanding of Israel, you're a heretic and you're going to hell, and you need to get saved. And so when I said, well, actually, I hold to a much more historical view of this subject, he immediately condemned me to hell. I need to get saved. So that they've added these things to the gospel. And so that's my background. And so some people might say, well, you react too much to that, you go too far the other way. Okay, fine. I'm not trying to tell people that they have to do exactly what I do when it comes to this. I also, in my background, went to Fuller Theological Seminary, which was way, way, way to my left. And I had to learn to appreciate what I could glean and learn from people way to my left, because almost all my professors, except for the professors that were drawn from Grand Canyon College, were way to my left. And I learned that people way over there can have great insights and know history well and all sorts of stuff like that. But I just had to be very discerning in how they came to their conclusions and identifying the role of tradition and things like that. So, but there's also a difference in looking at modern writers versus ancient writers. Ancient writers, you don't have all their context. There may be things in their lives that you don't know anything about. Things are influencing them that their writings don't communicate to us. And so I just think there's sort of a much more of a need to be more gracious, I guess, in giving credit where credit is due, because we just don't know. Now, when Tim Keller was alive, I criticized him for some of the things that he said. I mentioned very clearly once, I was up in Colorado, probably about 2013, 2014, somewhere around there. And I was driving in Colorado and I listened to a webcast he was on the topic of evil. And it was like half an hour long. And after half an hour, I'm like, this is not a Westminster man. This is not a Reformed man. That the view of evil he just presented was not Reformed at all. And I was a little shocked because, he's a Presbyterian and I sort of assumed certain things that I shouldn't have assumed. And so that's when I started hearing things that made me go, huh. And toward the end of his life, it got more and more, and you could identify some of the, quite simply, woke worldview that he had embraced in light of where he was ministering, in light of where his church was, in light of the people he was around, stuff like that. Now, do I think Tim Keller wasn't a Christian? No. But we're living in a time where you have a lot more of the context. You know what church he was in, and you've got hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of his commentary and sermons, and which we don't have for anybody in church history at all. We don't have that kind of stuff. Augustine, we've got enough to get a pretty good beat on, but for the vast majority of people, you just don't have that much there. So, there are people. I got asked a question. Was it yesterday morning? Mm-hmm. Yesterday morning, I got asked a question. I was doing a webcast. Actually, a fellowship group for someone else, and I was. It wasn't Keller. Oh, it was Gavin Ortland. One of the guys asked me about Gavin Ortland, and I'm like, well, look, obviously, Gavin and I don't see eye to eye on everything. He's more ecumenical than I am. He answers some questions in regards to Roman Catholicism differently than I do. But I said, at the same time, I've learned a tremendous amount from him. He does tremendous work in certain areas. I might disagree with him in other areas, but I recognize solid work when I see it, and I'm not going to close my eyes and ears to it just because we don't agree about climate change or something like that. There are a lot of people that just will not give that kind of freedom. If there are a lot of people online that if they disagree with you on climate change, then they disagree with you on everything. And I experience that all the time. And I said to the person I was talking to, I said, I think the reason that Gavin Ortland tries, in essence, to minimize the differences on minor issues is because he wants the focus to remain on what the real big issues are. And there is some wisdom in that, because let's just be honest, you look at social media and there's almost no emphasis on the big issues. Everything is about adiaphora, the things that don't matter. It's just this constant firestorm of controversy over stuff that really, at the end of the day, doesn't amount to a hill of beans. And so I said, in defense of Gavin Ortland, I think he might be bothering you because it's part of his focus. This is the stuff we got to be focused on. That other stuff doesn't matter. It's not that it doesn't matter, and I might put more weight onto other topics, but it's just the way it is. So, I can really appreciate Gavin Ortland. I can pray that God would continue to use him. He's probably not going to be preaching my church anytime soon. And I wouldn't be banging down the door to try to preach at his either. And you know what? That's perfectly fine. I have been cleansed of my independent fundamentalist Baptist disease of thinking there's something wrong about that. And so, it all comes back to biblical fidelity, and none of us have got it perfect. And people who think that they do generally tend to be extremely judgmental and narrow-minded, and aren't going to be listening to me anyways. So yeah, discernment's an important thing. And you know what? I'm not going to tell everybody that you have to discern things in the exact same way I do. I'll try to make my argument, and it would be great if we lived in a day where I could make my argument and somebody listens and goes, that's interesting. I don't really come to your same conclusion, and here's why. And I can go, well, I appreciate that too. I don't necessarily agree, but yeah, we can get along. That kind of maturity, unfortunately, is extremely rare.
I also think it's a challenge for Christians to really know the faith. I mean, I think part of the reason why I tended to avoid everything that maybe that person didn't match up with me on everything, and I'm not talking about the essentials, my ability to discern, I avoided it because I was afraid I was going to be influenced. Well, as I've grown and since I've become reformed with your help for the last 5 years, I've gotten deeper into scripture, and I'm more grounded in my faith. And so I'm trying to be a little more open in that regard. Not like that I'm not going to disagree with people, but not just write everybody off.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Well, I hope that's helpful to you, Brenda.
It is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. I can't believe we only have 6 minutes left. Let's talk to Samuel real quick, and we'll see how fast we can go here and to get to a few others. Sorry, other guys. I tend to yammer. I think I talk way longer on these phone calls because, hey, people have taken the effort to try to dial in. I'm not going to just go real fast. Samuel, what's up?
Hey, can you hear me?
I can.
Hey, no, kind of my question's on limited atonement, but a quick background. I grew up, I would say more conservative Baptist, not quite independent fundamentalist, but more on that side. A lot of people kind of would say like a 4-point Calvinist and things on that issue. So I'm, reading your books, listening to your arguments, and coming to the position of that, and and calling myself Reformed, but I'm still certainly don't know a lot. But then I have conversations with my sister, and specifically on limited atonement, and one of her arguments against it is basically if we believe in limited atonement, that Christ didn't die for every single individual, when you preach the gospel and say repent and believe, it's not genuine, because if that person is not an elect, then they really couldn't respond to it in faith, so it's not really a choice. So kind of for her, it gets back to the definition of choice. So she says they really can't choose. And then I'd say, well, they choose based on their their nature, they're sinful, they're fallen, they choose and they do what they want. But she's like saying, but yeah, that's not a real choice, and so basically the offer of the gospel to everyone's not genuine. So that's kind of one of the reasons she doesn't believe in limited atonement. But can you kind of talk about that?
Yeah. I'll try to be brief. People import all sorts of stuff into this conversation and basically say, well, you have to meet my parameters as to what a choice is. If there has been no atonement made for an individual, you can't preach the gospel to them, as if we somehow preach the gospel on the basis of having knowledge of who the elect are. That's not how the apostles did it. And yet the apostles never preached the idea that Christ has done all this for you, now you do this for him. So there basically isn't any way for folks like that to allow for the New Testament to define what atonement is and what the effect of intercession is, first and foremost, and then leave the rest of it to application. So the question is, did the apostles teach that there is a perfect harmony between the intention of the Father, Son, and Spirit in the election and the provision of perfect atoning salvation for a particular elect people, and that they chose to do this from eternity past, and that this is the drama of redemption, and that when Jesus taught that those people had been committed to him for salvation, and that he would lose none of them, that what he was teaching was true and consistent and believable. That's the issue. That should be what we're focused upon if we're going to be answering the question of what the atonement is and what God has done in the cross to save his elect people. Instead, what you get for stuff like this is, well, I want to theoretically speculate about a situation where the gospel is preached to someone who's not elect. Well, you don't know who's not elect, and I don't know who's not elect, and I don't know who is elect, or whatever else it might be. That's not a part of the New Testament parameter. You're bringing that in from outside. And so I just have to go, so why are you so focused upon these hypotheticals that the New Testament never raises, the apostles never dealt with? Why is that so important to you? Where is this coming from is the question that I have to ask. And it's coming from tradition. It's coming from synergistic tradition. It's coming from, well, if I'm really going to believe that God is truly just and righteous, then I'm going to have to believe this, that, or the other thing. That is not how you determine what the New Testament teaches on who Christ died for, why, and what the result of that is. And there just comes a point where someone has to go, you know what? I'm just going to believe what the Bible says about this, and I'm gonna go from there. And even if there are questions that I can't figure out, or if I'm not satisfied, I'm just going to stick with the scriptural conclusion and trust the Lord will either bring me satisfaction in my answer eventually, or after death. But I'm not going to go beyond Scripture at that point. So that's how I would address that.
Okay, but her reply to that basic, I think her objection is also she thinks it makes God evil.
Well,
It's the evil question.
see, I've said many times, the vast majority of people who call themselves 40-point Calvinists aren't. Almost always,
Exactly.
the objection to limited atonement is not an objection to limited atonement. It's an objection to unconditional election. It's just been put into different clothes, but it's actually fundamentally a rejection of the freedom of God to elect a people out of the whole mass of fallen sons and daughters of Adam to receive his grace and his mercy, not based upon what they do. That's, if you're going to say it makes God evil, that's what you're objecting to. You're not objecting to the idea that if God has an elect people, then obviously Christ is going to die in their place. He's going to be a perfect mediator for them, et cetera, et cetera. No, they haven't even gotten to that. They're really objecting to election. They're not objecting to limited atonement at all.
And also original sin. She said, well, I agree with you, but when we get to it, she still thinks there's something in mankind that they have the ability to choose.
Yeah, well, yeah, there you go. Yeah, there's a
We go
lot of foundational issues there that probably mean you need to go all the way back to sovereignty of God, providence, eternal decree, all the rest of that stuff. So, Sam, I'm gonna get one more caller after this, and we'll wrap it up today. We're gonna go a little bit late. So we're gonna take James, the general question. Sorry, Jesse. Sorry, Wesley. Sorry, Austin. We will try to do this a little bit more often. I keep forgetting to do this, and we'll try to get you at that point. Sorry about that. Again, I talk too much, but hey, once you get your question in, at least you know I'm not going to just go rushing past you. So, James, yes, sir, your last one. Let's try to do it quick.
Hey, Dr. White. Just want to echo what the previous callers have said. Just praying for you and your heart condition. Calling all the way from Northern Ireland. I sort of got into reaching Mormon missionaries through the work of yourself and Jeff Durbin. Back when I was about 14, I remember watching videos online of Jeff interacting with Mormons and just learning a lot. And then fast forward, I'm now 21, studying in university at Belfast and encountering lots of Mormon missionaries and so on. So just really trying to be a witness in that situation and so on. But I know over the years, I've found you guys talk a lot about the changing world of Mormonism.
Yeah.
And I've really felt that has continued to change. My recent conversation was with two young guys, and it was a very brief meeting, unfortunately, so it didn't get a lot in there. But I remember just trying to, sort of gauge where they're at and so on, and just asking questions in terms of one of the questions I asked was, do you guys believe that Jesus was created by the Father in some sense? Using the term literally begotten, as I've read that in a lot of literature and so on. And then they sort of said no. And I was sort of taken aback at that. And then I sort of tried to redirect the question to maybe find something a bit more specific and familiar, asking, do you believe that Jesus and Lucifer are brothers? Or as are we all, in that sort of sense? And they just looked at me as if I had two heads. So it's very it's going to be very difficult to navigate, and I suppose just my question would just be, what would be your advice in terms of there's obviously a lot of literature out there and so on, and there's a lot of literature in terms of what the LDS Church has produced, and it can be a bit intimidating starting out. It's like, okay, the challenge of converting the Mormon to Mormonism before you can get them out.
Yeah.
Sort of become increasingly challenging and so on. And I suppose what would be your advice in that context?
Yeah, you're exactly right, because when I was actually younger than you and I started my study of Mormonism, it was intimidating, the amount of literature and things like that. But I had it easy. It was a pretty stable target at that point in time. And what they had been teaching and believing had been the same thing for decades. And so I could read somebody like Joseph Fielding Smith, who had written 20, 30 years earlier, and they wouldn't already be out of date and irrelevant like Bruce R. McConkie is now. So, yeah, you do have a different situation now with how rapidly Mormonism is changing. And look, the missionaries have never been the gold standard of defining LDS theology. A lot of those poor young guys. I mean, I remember we were up at General Conference, one of the last General Conferences we went to. We started flying at the end, a whole lot easier than that 12-hour drive to Salt Lake City. And, well, 12 hours if you obey the speed limit. I won't tell you how fast we could get there. But anyway, you set the record? Okay. Well, no, I think me and DL set the record coming back when the kid was getting born. That's when we set the record. Anyway, I think the cops are still trying to chase us on that one. But anyway, there was this LDS missionary who was going out on his mission. The MTC, the Missionary Training Center in Provo, had just graduated a class. And this poor kid ends up seated at the window of the row with me and my son in the middle and aisle seats, and missionaries in the row in front that are straining to listen to this. And this kid was clueless. He had no idea what he was doing. He shot an entire roll of film on an Instamatic during takeoff. Okay, he had never been in a plane before. All right, that's what we're talking about here. And so even back then, you'd run into these missionaries, and the MTC, the Missionary Training Center, even back then only gave you minimal information, and now I'm wondering what in the world they're doing in there, because the missionaries do tend to be utterly clueless now. So it does, at least back then, when we started witnessing to a Mormon, we had some base from which to work. We're going to be heading out to the Christmas lights stuff at the Mormon Temple starting, I think, within a couple of weeks. And when you talk to people out there, we used to be able to assume a certain level of knowledge, even down to the 9, 10, 11-year-olds. Now, it doesn't matter if it's an adult, whoever. You've got to let them talk long enough to get some idea of where in the world they're coming from and what in the world they know. Because Mormonism is such a broader spectrum of belief now. And so, we started carrying, even when we were still going up to Salt Lake City, I'd start carrying teachings of Prophet Joseph Smith, maybe a copy of Mormon Doctrine. Man, most Mormons today have never even seen those books. Don't even know who they were. Don't even know who they're written by. So it is much more challenging. You have to be prepared for a much wider range of expression of belief than in the past. And that can mean you end up talking for a long, long period of time. I know my son-in-law, he heads up our LDS outreach at Apologia Church. And there are times where he said, I got home about 3 o'clock in the morning. Wow, that was a long conversation. Yeah, it took the first 2 hours just to figure out where the guy was coming from, and then I could finally, do something. But it took a long time to get there. And I'm too old for that. he's young, he can survive it. But so you have to let him talk, and you may find yourself in situations where you literally know more about the Orthodox historical LDS theology than this Mormon does. Yeah. And so it's weird to try to convert them to Mormonism to then get them converted out of Mormonism. But sometimes it's almost what you have to do. Sometimes it's like they think Mormonism is actually just sort of a little bit different version of Christianity, and they don't even know just how radically different it is until you explain it to them. So, yep, you're running into what all of us are running into these days, and it is the changing world of Mormonism, and it's definitely a challenge. But I appreciate your watching the videos and that you have a heart to reach these folks. I mean, they tend to be really great folks, and it's heartbreaking to think about what they believe and how false it is, and how there are so few Christians that actually reach out to them and do so with any level of knowledge at all. It's heartbreaking. So keep doing it. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was helpful. Where I have time, I sort of to summarize what I've sort of encountered. There's still that emphasis upon the Book of Mormon the internal testimony, those sorts of things. So that is a connection point to go back to Scripture and to say, okay, how does Scripture call us to test authority claims and prophets and so on? And I found it to be quite bipolar, because it's sort of, they're emphasizing this sort of role of the modern day prophet as an interpreter of Scripture. Sort of similar to our Roman Catholic or Eastern Orthodox friends will bring the charge against Protestants. But then once you go to the statements of those prophets and those apostles, they don't want to touch them.
Yep.
So it's nearly bipolar in that sense, you know.
It is. They want the comfort of the authority claim without the necessity of that authority claim to actually be consistent or coherent or historical or anything else. So yeah, it is amazing because, man, when I first started talking to Mormons, they would go to the mat in defense of Joseph Smith as a prophet. Now, well, you know, prophets make mistakes. It's like, whoa, okay, what?
I've had the inerrancy of the Book of Mormon denied. I'm not sure if that was a common thing back in the day as well.
No.
I haven't encountered that.
Nope. That's all new stuff. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure how the church survives it, because once you start getting that level of diversity within a strict authoritarian structure like that, the breaks and the cracks in the foundation start coming fast and furious. So we'll see what comes of that. Hey, well, God bless you out there, James. Keep doing the Lord's work, and thanks for listening.
Thanks very much.
All right, God bless. Thank you. Hey, that was great, everybody. That worked. Sorry? What? Well, thank you very much. Yes, I do realize I did not pass out during the show. Thank you. I still have to drive home in that big truck. Anyway, that went really, really well. Great questions. Sorry to the people we didn't get to, but you know, we do this every time. We always have fun with it, and then for some reason we stop doing it, and I'm not sure why. So we should probably like set a timer or something like that. Well, at least, yeah. You probably should do it like twice a month, something like that, to give folks an opportunity to ask questions. Otherwise, we wouldn't be thinking of. So, yeah. One of the problems is, you know, I head out next week. We can do it in the rig. Yeah, I don't know. We're starting to test the limits of technology, but yeah, we should try. I don't think we ever have done it in the rig. But we do. We should try it. We should try this next trip. We should try doing it from the RV and see if we can make it work. That would sort of be interesting to do. So, hey, it's easier for me on preparation, anyways. You know, don't have to have stuff queued up and all that kind of stuff. All right, thanks for listening to the program. We'll be back next week. Of course, next Thursday is Thanksgiving, and then I'm on the road, so we'll see what the schedule looks like. And, you know, hopefully my kittens are feeling better by then, or you're going to see a very depressed man not wearing a Kuji next week. Let's just put it that way. All right, thanks for watching the program. God bless. We'll see you later.